lemonade and a reusable straw. How's everybody else doing?
I'm doing.
Yeah, can let me know in the chat, or let me know about the highlights or your favorite parts of the summit so far.
Liza, I'm going to go ahead and make you the host.
Actually, it's Deja who's our host for this next part.
Oh, shoot. All right. Well, then, Liza, you want to hand it over to Deja?
Hey, everybody.
Okay, I got it.
You all can jump in whenever you're ready.
Well, first things first, how's everybody's day going? It's a Sunday. I'm on the East Coast. Teens Pack, we're on the East Coast. So how's everybody's day? I know it's morning on the West Coast. How's everybody's morning? You know, everybody eat their breakfast.
I'm having a pretty good day. I'm really excited. Hannah says they're good and cuddling with their dog.
Oh, that's so cute.
Anybody else? What did anybody do this morning? You know?
I'm having a great morning.
That's good to hear. Is it raining? Because I'm upstate New York. So is it raining in the city?
I think so. I hear rain at the window, but it might just be an AC. I don't know.
I don't know. This rain got me feeling sleepy, you know? I don't know why. I don't know if it's just me, but like when it rains, I get a little sleepy.
Yeah, it makes me feel like, nah, I'm not gonna get up today.
Right?
Okay, so I guess we'll just get right into it. So we're peer educators from Teens Pact, and today we're doing a workshop on sexting and trust. You can go to the next slide, Asia. So as I said, we're wonderful. Hey, wonderful people. We're peer educators from Community Healthcare Network Teens Pact. PACT stands for Positive Actions and Choices for Teens. We provide low to no cost confidential reproductive health care for people ages 10 to 24 years old. Some of these services include condom distribution, birth control, HIV testing, STI testing and treatment, gynecology exams, testicular exams, and Plan B when Plan A doesn't work. We have many clinics all throughout New York City, all boroughs except Staten Island. So for more information, you can follow us at Teens Pact on Facebook and Instagram.
Before we move on, I'm just gonna introduce myself and the other peers, if you guys can introduce yourselves. My name is Lacey. My pronouns are she, her.
My name is Zaya. My pronouns are she, her.
My name is Deja. My pronouns are she, her.
My name is Alicia. My pronouns are she, her.
My name is Liza. My pronouns are she, her.
Okay, so we're gonna start off with an icebreaker. If you guys have any questions during the presentation, just put them in the chat, or you guys can unmute or raise a hand and then unmute, whatever is comfortable for you. But the icebreaker question is, if you could live inside of any TV show, what would it be?
Y'all can feel free to yell out your answers or type them in the chat.
A Different World.
I like
I
that one.
haven't seen that. Oh my gosh. I need to watch that.
I think mine would be probably One-on-One. I think I would want to be in that show. Like, I just like the energy in that show. It's just, it gives me vibes.
I don't know. I think Living Single, because they're in New York, and then I like the vibes of that show.
I was thinking Moesha.
Moesha?
Someone said, Hannah said, New Girl.
Ooh. Liza said any cartoon, period.
Anyone else? Don't be shy.
Irene said Jersey Shore. That would be fun. That's a party every day.
That would be hilarious. All right, I think we can move on. If you guys get any ideas, y'all can put them in the chat.
So, what is sexting? So, sexting is when people send or receive sexual pictures, messages, or videos through technology. So, some examples may include, but are not limited to, send nudes, Snapchat me that, you trying to show me. If anybody has any other examples, they could put it in the chat.
Right. And then sometimes I feel like it's not always that like straightforward. Sometimes it's implied, which also makes it a little difficult. So here are some of our pro tips if you do want to send someone a sext. So sexting should be a fun bonding experience between you and the person you're sexting with. So before you actually send the sext, you should ask yourself, is it legal? Do I want to do this? And will it get shared? Because this should be a experience where where it's consensual on both sides and you feel that you can trust the other person and that that person trusts you. So you should also never share someone else's sext without their consent because it's bullying, cyberbullying, and considered sexual harassment. And it's also against the law in New York State and New York City.
Deja, I think you gotta unmute your thing to for us to hear it.
Yeah, you have to share your sound.
You guys hear that? You hear that?
Yes.
Oh, this thing is glitching. So now we're gonna watch the PSA about sexting.
Other people sleep while I wake, encased in dreams that carry me to a distant sound to wanna take. I feel its weight, even though I'm helpless on the
Damn. Damn what? What's that? Let me see, bro. Go, get out of here. Don't worry about it. Is that Felicia? Come on, let me see. See? Nothing. Oh, that's messed up, bro. Actually, it's not. Whatever.
So now we're gonna ask some questions. We're gonna talk about what we just saw. You guys have any comments before we start about that? Okay. So why was the boyfriend's friend upset over the choice not to show him the sext? What do you think about the boyfriend's choice not to show his friends the sext?
I think the boyfriend was right not to show his friend the sex, because I think oftentimes in society, a woman's body is viewed as an object rather than them being a person. So the boyfriend, I feel like he was right by not showing. But I feel like it was kind of weird that he asked when he was with his friend. Like, you could have asked when you were at home. Like,
Right. Thank you for that, Liza. Again, you can unmute or type in the chat. You know, we're monitoring both. Right. I agree with Liza. I think that his choice to not show his friends not show his friend the sex was really respectable and just really trustworthy.
Kai, correct me if I'm wrong, Kendra said that the friend was upset because there's an expectation for those things to be shared. And Priya says, yeah, it was right not to show his friend, but wrong to pressure her into sending the text right then and there. Thank you guys for your answers.
Yes, I agree. Second question says, nearly 1 in 8 teens have shared a sext without consent. How would you educate those teens about not sharing sex without consent?
we can always have the discussion of what consent is. And then, I mean, I don't believe in fear mongering, but it's always safe to let people know that there's laws against sending unsolicited sex.
It's
Priya,
a fact. Ooh,
sorry.
you could go.
Okay, Priya says, I would give an analogy of some kind.
Right. Zai, you can go because you're waiting.
To go off what Liza said, I know that some of us are in different states. So if you would like to mention, if you know the laws regarding consent in your state, you can mention that also. Like we mentioned before, Teens Pack is New York City based, so we might not know, well, we don't really know the other states and their consent laws. So if you know it, you could type it in the chat.
Irene says, also letting teens know that consent, yes and no, are a valid answer. And in California, consent is only for those over the age of 18.
I didn't know that. In New York, it's 17, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Thank you, Dee. So I think consent plays a really big part of sharing sex and communicating with your partner. And I think that the biggest thing you can do is educate about what consent is, because many people don't know that consent can be like taken back at any point. So just because you've gone along with something for a while doesn't mean that you can't not say no, because you have the power to say no at any time should you feel uncomfortable. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily realize and that they should realize.
I agree. And I also feel like after you give, like, not even after you give consent, but when someone is asking you or sexting you or asking you to send nudes, like, it puts pressure on you or on the relationship period, because people might think, oh, if I don't do this, then he's not gonna want to be with me, or if I don't do this, then he's gonna, like it may put pressure on the individual.
Especially if they've never sent anyone those kinds of things before.
And it takes a lot to trust somebody like that, so it could really yeah, it could put pressure on you.
And then our last question, what do you think teens should do when they receive a sext?
Priya says keep it to themselves. I agree.
Also, what if it was a non-consensual sex? Like you did not want that to be sent to you. What should you do then?
Irene says letting them know not to do that, you're not ready for that, or to ask before sending the sext. I agree. I believe that if that is the case, then you should communicate with your partner and tell them how you feel about it. Priya says if you know them, tell them you aren't comfortable with it. And if you don't, block them or report them.
Do you have any other comments? I would say I agree with everything stated. I feel like a lot of unsolicited sexting is kind of like normalized, like with thirst traps and like private stories. People just add you to like things that you might not be comfortable seeing. So like Lacey said, always staying in communication was what you want in a situation.
Okay, so this is the next slide. We want to talk about safe sexting. So safe sexting 101. For starters, be mindful of who you send nudes to. Make sure you trust the person enough to minimize the risk you take when sending nudes. Be very careful when sending nudes to people, especially when you want to send them to someone you've only met online. And don't stray too far out of your comfort zone when sexting. Your consent should always be given willingly and enthusiastic. Consent is key no matter the means of communication. There is no excuse for not getting it, even if it's online. Basically, I would say to follow up on this, you don't have to be in person to say no. No means no at the end of the day. If you don't want to send a nude, if you don't want to give consent, you don't have to.
So when sending explicit photos, make sure your location is off. Some photos get geotagged and this can be dangerous to your safety. So if you want to make sure that this is something that's not happening, you can go onto your device, go onto when location is enabled and allowed for photos to be marked with locations. You can turn this setting on and off so that you can keep your location private on your phone. Also, when sending risky images to someone that you don't especially know too well, or you don't want them to know your location, you can also turn off locations for that specific person.
The next one is it's safer for your privacy to hide identifiable birthmarks and tattoos when you use sex. So if you have certain birthmarks like by certain body parts, and if you've ever taken a picture and somebody's like seen it before, like on Instagram or something, and like God forbid you're in a situation where someone, you know, posts your thing, um, that's very good. So make sure that you find ways to like hide it. Also with tattoos, you know, there's Facetune, there's Adobe Photoshop if you want to really get technical. There's like Pixlr editor, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, so it's helpful to think about what in the photo could be identifiable, birthmarks, also piercings. If you have belly piercings or nipple piercings. Yeah, so 'cause
Even
maybe
rings
that,
and necklaces.
yeah, because maybe that necklace or that belly ring that you have, like somebody saw that before. And you almost might be like, oh, I seen that belly ring before. Like,
And even nowadays, like I know personally, I wear beads around my waist. So if y'all have beads around your waist, like things like that, just make sure, like even take your beads off, like just make sure that you're not showing anything that can identify you or be associated with you.
I've also heard of people like drawing on fake tattoos and birthmarks. Then, you know, like you can wash it off and it's like, that's not me.
That's interesting.
that's a fact. Because I have a birthmark on my face and on my like my thing, and I noticed that like I have a lot of them, and it's like you ain't see it. If I was to ever send like something, I'd be like, you ain't see it. You know, get an airbrush.
Yeah. Make it go away.
Okay, so these are some scenarios that we want to test your guys' response with. So how would you react? Scenario 1, you decide to send your partner a sext and find out that they showed their friends. You can type in the chat or unmute if you feel comfortable.
I would feel really disrespected. I also want to say I feel like double standards are always important whenever we talk about these type of things, because I feel like I obviously identify as a girl. Like I said, my pronouns are she, her. And I think whenever we talk about exposing, it's like it's something that happens to us a lot, and like it sucks. But then I feel like whenever a boy gets his nudes exposed, like they're just supposed to be like, okay, like you should be lucky that they're looking at you at all. Like, hello.
That's definitely really important that to realize that there is a double standard for people who have vaginas and people who have penises, because a lot of times the people who have penises are praised for that, and then if you have a vagina, you're stigmatized for it. Also in the chat, Priya said, remind them that you aren't okay with that. Yes. Scenario 2, your friend asks to see a nude of your partner as proof that you all are dating.
Yeah, I think this scenario has a lot to do with like boundaries. Like letting your friends know that there are some things that you share with them and things that can affect other people that you don't share with them. So for me, I would definitely think about boundaries in the situation.
Right. This question, I don't know, it makes me upset because why do you need to see a nude to prove that you're dating? Like, why does that the automatic answer, you know? Prius added on, said, explain why that's not okay. And then Claire says, I would say no. And honestly, I would stop being a friend because they should know how personal that stuff is. Right. As Deja said, setting that boundary that some things are off limits and some things aren't. Then our last scenario, a sext or nude is going around and you're being pressured to look at it.
Priya said leave. Um, yeah, keep the responses coming. Also, if you want to send it privately to one of us, you can. The feature is available for you to send a private message to us to respond to these scenarios. So yeah.
Yeah, so like Priya said, leaving or changing your surroundings or who you're communicating with so you feel comfortable. Always remember that you are in control of every situation. So if you don't feel comfortable looking at a nude that's going around, you are, being responsible and self-aware by removing yourself from the situation.
Yeah, I would definitely remove myself from the situation because if I'm not saying if they broke trust this time, then they will never have trust again. But it is not like if you don't feel comfortable around that, it's hard to get comfortable again when somebody has done something like that to you. So I feel like I would definitely leave and find someone who respects me more, and because we deserve better than someone who does that.
In the chat, I see Kim said, let them know I don't want to look at it and check in with the owner of the sext and check if it was consensually shared. And Claire said, explain to whoever's pressuring me that they shouldn't be spreading it around either.
Kendra said, have a conversation with those friends about boundaries.
I think I would like to touch on heavily on Kendra's point. I agree with that 100%. I think it is very important to always have those conversations and to have conversations like this and make it normalized, like discussing, consent and discussing like boundary setting and things of that sort. Um, I know it could be different for everyone in terms of where you live and things of that sort. Especially when it comes to consent and things along those lines. New York is very strict with their laws, and you know, moral code is just if you got a sex, keep it to yourself. It's between you and the person that sent it, or you and the person that you sent it to. Like, sit. But does anybody have anything else to say regarding any parts of this entire slide and the other slides and stuff?
I just want to touch on the fact that we've been talking about like sending nudes of yourself, like yourself sending nudes and people asking for nudes. But if you, I just wanted to say, like, if it's illegal to send a nude of someone else as well. Like you should not be sending nudes of other people. It's illegal and you can get in trouble for it. So be mindful of that.
Especially if they're underage, because then it's considered child pornography.
Yeah, I wanted to say that today's conversation, we spoke a lot about sexting and it being something that happens in relationship, when two people are trying to, sexually speak about things to get into the groove or whatever of the relationship. I just wanted to say that a lot of times I think we sex to like prove a point or like to keep interest, but I know that some of the best like therapy is like self-love and like self-interest. So even if you are taking pictures, the joy in just having things for yourself that you keep personal to you is also important in the realm of being more comfortable with sharing those pictures with other people.
Just said, I like that someone said they check in with the person in the picture. It could be an opportunity to educate your friends about consent and child pornography, legalities, etc., etc. Yes, that was a very good point.
Also, if you guys have any questions about this topic, you guys can put it in the chat or unmute your mics and we can answer them. Or even if you have questions about Teens Pact, we can answer them.
In the chat, I see Kendra said, I really appreciate how you all talked about ways to text safely. I think it's so important to talk about these topics without shame. Absolutely, especially without shame. Shayel asked, why do you think that youth are pressured to send nudes?
Like I said before, I feel like and I don't know from a guy's perspective, so if there's any guys in here, feel free to follow up on it. But I feel like as a female, if a guy is asking you to send nudes and you're not comfortable with it, like even though you're not comfortable with it, I feel like it puts pressure on you and your partner and your relationship because it makes you feel like, oh, I want to give them what they want, like I want to please my partner, but I don't feel comfortable with it. So if I don't please my partner, then what comes after that? Like, will my partner still want to be with me? Will my partner still love me? Will my partner still like me? Like, will they accept me for me saying no? And that shouldn't put pressure on a relationship. Like, it should be normalized, definitely.
Shayla asked, how do you think social media plays a role in sexting?
Me personally, surprisingly, since as social media has aged, I realized that the use like sexting, not that it hasn't dropped, but people are finding different ways of sexting that are not as intimate. There's more like broad platforms that are now being used which are basically, sexting. You have DMs, you have stories, you have private stories, or people are invited to see like certain content, and then you have there's rooms where people share private pictures. I think social media is making sexting more of a habit that people are having necessarily, like the way that we're posting pictures or the certain way that we're interacting with each other. But as time is changing, we see how platforms are arranging what's allowed to be shown on social media or type of context that you're willing to post. So sometimes if you are posting like send nudes, you could possibly be, reported on Instagram for posting things like that, so that it's staying as a platform that people can comfortably share instead of, it being the topic of a certain platform.
Right. And I think that when it comes to social media, especially now, it kind of brings into the conversation platforms like OnlyFans and things like that. Ooh, in the chat, Shayla also asks, how has the shadow banning affected Teens Pack? Shadow banning has really affected Teens Pack because we give people information about sex related topics and STIs, and we mostly do that on our Instagram, and Instagram doesn't really like to have that kind of information out there for whatever reason. But I think that it's such a bad thing because that's how a lot of people get their information is through social media. So continuing to shadow ban us is really weakening our impact in our communities and society.
And I also think that the shadow banning contributes to the lack of resources and the lack of education that students get, and like even not even students, but in our generation and time, the lack of resources and support that people get, teens and even adults, because there's some adults that even aren't educated, as well as kids, and mistakes happen and people get pregnant and STDs, STIs, etc. And so I think that plays a role in that, because without the education, then you're just leaving people to make mistakes and not know what they're doing.
I agree. I believe that when it comes to sex education, I know in America, like we're behind, and like in countries like Denmark and Norway and like in Europe, they teach sex education and they format it in a way for like each grade. So like you're hearing pre-K and kindergarten, like they're learning about consent, things of that sort. And I think with in America, it's always this idea that when it comes to sex education, like people just often think of it in like just discussing sexual intercourse, and there's so much that entails with it. And as like time is progressing, like teaching about pronouns, you could teach that to kids at a young age. You could teach about consent at a young age. And I think we've all noticed throughout this entire summit how we still have to educate adults and we still have to educate youth continuously, because there's always something new that is being brought out into society about all of the things that we discuss when it comes to sex education. And I feel like I guess the amount of pressure that's put into re-updating history and history textbooks, that same pressure should be applied with sex education. Because I know for me, I always tell people I'm very privileged enough to be a part of Teens Pact and also be from New York City, where it's like we can get free and confidential health care services. But when I go visit friends in like Baltimore or like from Chicago and things of that sort, they don't have those access. They don't have that access to those resources. They don't have that knowledge, that tools and stuff like that. So it's very hard to try to, accommodate for so many people. So shadow banning does affect Teens Pact, because it's like now, because of COVID, everybody's so heavily using social media. And it's like Teens Pact is doing the thing with educating and showing that like you can educate through social media.
I like that you brought up the point about teaching little kids about pronouns, because I think that a lot of times people see little kids as little kids and they want to keep them as innocent as possible. But starting, and then when you're saying, I teach my child sex ed, people think that you're telling them about intercourse and STIs when it's more than that. It's teaching about consent and how to say no and boundary setting, even at a young age, because not knowing how to set boundaries is a very important skill to have, especially in adult lives when kids are exposed to more things and they're getting into relationships and they're learning what they want and what they don't want. So giving them these tools at a young age and allowing that to grow and prosper so that they can make these informed decisions is so important. Liza said, mind you, the kids see and hear everything. Yep, kids are like sponges. They see and hear everything and they, squeeze it back out and they share it. So we need to nurture their minds and give them all the good tools so that they can spread that and help others.
You can feel free to ask any other questions, either about sexting or about Teens Pack.
Shale said, "This is great. Thank you."
I actually have a question for you guys. How do you guys feel about parents and children, and how parents are talking to their children or educating their children about sex?
I don't want to say that like I'm a mother, a second mother, but like I feel like as an older sibling, you're technically the second parent. So being a part of Teens Fact for so long, I make it my mission to educate my little sister, although she's 7, but like simple things of like, hey, if you don't want to give somebody a hug, don't give them a hug. Like sometimes my mom, she feels like, I'm instilling like this attitude for my little sister, but I personally feel like if my little sister doesn't feel comfortable giving somebody a hug, giving somebody a kiss on the cheek if she greets, that's fine. Also, educating her about pronouns and not instantly assuming that, some people like by what you see physically, that's their pronouns and stuff like that. And also showing her how, because in English, they teach about pronouns, verbs, and adverbs. So meeting the kids halfway and like telling her, hey, you learned about pronouns in English class. Let me teach you some pronouns that, people will say, like, hey, this is my pronouns and stuff like that. So
Right. Like kids have the right to consent too, and people don't really realize that. And I think that is so terrible how sex education from a young age is so stigmatized because, especially like with what you said about assuming things, because I think that a lot of times the older generation sees just like assuming what people look like on the outside is just what it is. And they don't, they're not with the newer ideas about being more inclusive and realizing that not everyone fits into these gender roles put in place by society. Many people don't identify with society. And I think that it is so important to teach children that, and so that they can make their own choices when they get older and more informed.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
also think it's important just to know who you are. Like, um, a lot of times we shelter children from learning about their sexuality, like what it is to be sexually awakened young, like, to feel pleasure there or be curious about your body parts. And we use words that turn away from the actual words that are necessary for children to learn. And then they turn 12 and then we're like, okay, now you need to learn all this. And you're already been using words like cookie and lollipop for years. So I think sexual education should start from, when we're old enough to realize that we're people and we're, living and breathing.
Yep. And even if like we said, kids have the right to consent too. So even if it's not sexual, like if you take a picture of your child and your child says that they don't want it posted, they should have the right to tell you that, and the respect for you not to post that picture. Like I just wanted to touch up on that.
I want to talk about what Alicia said about like how the older generation has all these like ideologies that kind of feed into like the binaries of our gender roles that like we all kind of assimilate to. And it's just like crazy because like at Teens Fact we always talk about like these subjects, and I always remember how like when discussing our pronouns workshop we talk about how like in native cultures they used to honor people who might be intersex by calling them two spirited, and it's like not just a like identity, but it's also something that you respect. Like you respect those people for how they identify. And I feel like it's kind of sad that our older generation doesn't respect that. And I feel like that's just a direct link to colonialism and white supremacy, because like they want us to think that like if you're not like white or like privileged in that demographic, then like you're not really a person. So then it's crazy because like I think that so many people have been othered, and then like everyone who's in the othered communities, like we've created community, and then they get mad at us for like having that community, and then we get appropriated, or then it's just so crazy. Like the point is that there's just so much respect and culture like for all the things that like our older generation has like kind of been like, actually like that's not right, like the way you're living is wrong, I don't agree with your lifestyle. So I think having these conversations are so important because like we get to debunk all that and like respect one another.
I also think that respect looks differently now, like from an older generation to the newer generation, because now, we ask people their pronouns. The older generation might not do that. As Zaya said, hugging your guests and kissing them on the cheek. And, that's considered respectful to the older generation, but the newer generation might not feel comfortable doing that. And it is expected of you to do that, even if you don't feel comfortable, which is where boundaries aren't being taken into consideration, especially as a young person, because, like these are your family. Why don't you do that? And yes, they're my family, but I don't have to do that. And I think people don't really see that part of boundary setting. It's not to be disrespectful, it's to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. And it's not to make you feel like you're a bad person or anything. It's just, I don't feel comfortable for whatever reason. And all those reasons are valid. So you should never feel uncomfortable for trying to make yourself feel comfortable.
Priya said, as a teen, I try to talk about lesser talked about subjects like sex, racism, sexism, the negative effects of religion, etc. around my sister and friends. What other things should be brought up?
I like that you added religion into it, which that's a whole other kind of conversation, but religion definitely does have an impact, religion and culture, things like that, because those have been around for so long and there are so many set rules, and the newer generation kind of asks questions about that, and the older generation doesn't really think that it should be questioned and it should be as is. So I think that's also worth mentioning.
Yeah, I would say self. Like we always start with all the aspects of sex, racism. That's like human aspects. Like what about self before we even get into the like who am I in those isms and what do I believe in those isms? So definitely like getting in tune and having conversations about how you view yourself personally around these topics, and then having the conversation about the topics in a larger sense. So yeah, that's what I think about the things to, conversation.
I think something that should be brought up is parents, really like parents and the way not to question the way they raise their kids, but parents like talking to their children more, educating their children more. And like it may not be that the parents don't want to educate their children, but are the parents educated? And how can we educate the parents? And with that being said, thank you guys for coming out today. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the participation. And you, like we said, you can follow us at Teens Pact on Instagram for information on virtual events, IG Lives, virtual workshops, Safe Sexting 101, and a bunch of other fun stuff. So y'all let us know what y'all want to see. The IG's in the chat, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you all so much. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll let everybody take a little pause and then come back for our next session. Staying strong on this third day of our summit. Thank you, everyone. Do some self-care, everybody.
We really appreciate you, Shale, doing all the hard work to make this happen and make Safe Bay a space. We really, really appreciate that.